Okay, before we get into today's headlines, and there's plenty around, as I said, on the weekend, a free trade deal with Indonesia was signed in Jakarta, and it's a deal that's been almost 10 years in the making. But today, there are real concerns that this deal could fall through under a Labor government due to union resistance. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke to Agriculture Minister David Littleproud about the future of this deal, mining and jobs in his home state of Queensland, and today's national account figures, the Bradfield water scheme, and behaviour, very worrying behaviour, of animal activists on Australian farms. Well, thank you for coming on the show, David Littleproud. I want to get straight into the national accounts figures out today. Pretty anaemic growth in the December quarter, 0.2. It's tailing off, obviously, out of the housing numbers, mining investments coming away, and also the drought, a big impact in your agricultural portfolio. This is probably accounting why, you know, everyone says the economy's doing okay, but people are not feeling it in their pockets. This would be the last time, the worst time, that you would bring in policies to hit mining, hit housing, and hit consumers, but that's exactly what your opponents are proposing.
Oh, totally. And you only have to look at my home state of Queensland and the lunacy that is happening up there with the Queensland State Government. They're going to put a wrecking ball through mining investment, an industry that has really driven the Queensland economy and the nation's economy. This is about confidence, it's about sovereign risk, about people seeing that we're sane. And unfortunately, this lunacy that's been predicated by people that want to push a view that's on a philosophy that a small minority in metropolitan Australia think is good because they can afford to have that philosophical view, and they want to impose that on the rest of Australians. They want to do that to us and not understand that's killing jobs, Australian jobs. Those people that get up in the morning, they fight to make a quid, and they need an opportunity to make a quid through mining, agriculture, or even in construction as a tradie.
Look, your home state of Queensland, as I said, is ground zero on these mining, fights, the activism. We mentioned just then the law, or the legislation, the proposed legislation, not law yet, in the Queensland Parliament to ban mining. Jackie Trad, the Treasurer in Queensland, said that miners need to re-skill, i.e. their jobs are not going to be there in the future. We know today the unions are out there throwing a lot of doubt over the newly signed Indonesian Free Trade Agreement. It hasn't yet been ratified, and it looks like it might suffer if Labor are elected. How bad would that be, particularly for Queensland agriculture, or agriculture around the country who want to export into Indonesia? 300 million people.
Yeah, well, look, the unions are prepared to destroy agriculture but won't stand up for the mining industry. The reality is if they were to hold themselves firm to their principles, they'd take on the state government in Queensland about mining and not donate any more money to them. But what they're going to do is put a wrecking ball to the trade agreements. Let me put it in simple terms. We're a nation of 25 million people. We produce enough food for 75 million. If we don't engage with the world, if we don't trade with the world, then sadly we don't have an agricultural sector and we don't have regional communities. And in fact, they're also trying to take a wrecking ball to how we bring in our unskilled labour, because we compete with other nations like Canada and New Zealand, and they're trying to destroy that because they think in a utopia that there's going to be Australians travel right across this country and pick fruit up in Bowen and then go down to Shepparton all in a matter of a week. It's just impractical. And these philosophical views that are based on theory without practical application of people on the ground, this is the sort of stuff that is being driven, and sadly people in metropolitan Australia are getting sucked into this. 30, 40 years ago, people in the city had a cousin, uncle, aunt in the bush, and they understood what we did and understand what happened in the mining industry because they came out and looked and listened. Now they get this philosophical view that's thrown down their throats by ideologues that just makes them feel warm and fuzzy at night, but the reality is it doesn't pay the bills. And the unions need to get out of the way. The trade agreements are so important. They're putting dollars in cockies' pockets every day. China, South Korea, Japan, TPP-11, Peru, now Indonesia, our nearest neighbour. This is boom for agriculture. Agriculture is sexy again. The story of agriculture is just add rain. And these morons need to get out of our way and let us get on with the job.
Where's the Labor Party on this one? We know it's the unions and we know that they're the paymasters of the Labor Party, but I'm looking for some of these Labor leaders, Labor ministers or shadow ministers, and I haven't heard a lot pushing back against the unions today.
Well, this is the situation that we're in. They're the masters of the Labor Party, the union, and they'll tell them what to do because they've got the chequebook. and they'll tell them what to do, and they'll keep telling them right up to election in May. But you know, this is what's good for the nation. And as I said, if we don't trade with the world, we don't have an agricultural sector, we don't have regional communities, and we're about to make real money. All we need is rain, and this type of tinfoil hat approach to trade and understanding our place in the world and the opportunities it's providing in bringing our young people home into industries like agriculture and mining into the regions, because there's money to be made if we can export and we tap into markets. It actually works, and I see it in my own electorate where farmers, when it rains, they're getting more for their beef, for their cotton, their grain, and you know what? That flows in through our regional communities and employs extra teachers and nurses and doctors, and because the servo's pumping money out, the cafe's got some people buying lattes, even in Cunnamulla. So these are the sort of things that are underpin our nation's economy and make us strong. And for those that want to tear it down, they're only tearing down our nation's wealth and our future.
Okay, you've mentioned rain there a couple of times, and obviously that came through in the national accounts because there was a drought impact in those anemic numbers. We've heard and heard and heard probably now for nearly 80 years about the Bradfield scheme, or schemes like it, to take water from areas where we have too much to areas where we need it. If we could irrigate most of Western New South Wales, most of Western Queensland, we would be a huge food bowl for our region. There is talk that the federal government might get real on the issue of looking at a Bradfield scheme. We had the National Party leader here in New South Wales going into his local election here fighting for it. Is there any listening space in Canberra? Are you fighting at the table for this, for your upcoming May election?
Already done it, Peter. We put $1 billion, I should say, on the table already. I can go around and dig as many holes as I want around this country, but unless the state governments allow me to fill them, they're just holes. We need leadership on this. We're Australians. We're smarter than anyone else. But we perpetrate our own misery sometimes by trying to find reasons not to do things. We're smart enough to get the balance right in looking after the environment, but making sure we use that precious resource better. And whether it's Bradfield or an iteration of it, it only makes common sense for us to explore it and to use our technology of the here and now and into the future to look at these type of projects to get water around into other parts of the country, to drought-proof us, but to make us more productive. Lo and behold, make more money for this nation.
How can we make it real though, Minister? Please forgive me. Long before you were in Parliament, I was there as a staffer, and I have heard this spiel. I've said it myself many times. I've seen reports of the 200 pages worth of dams that we should put around this country. How can you make this real?
Well, and it's about us cutting a cheque. Because you know what? The states use us as their ATM. They come to us when they've got all the problems, and they won't move on things like building key infrastructure unless we cut a cheque. So we're going to have to cut a cheque. We've done it for Inland Rail, we've done it for NBN, a number of nation-building projects. And this is another one about how do we look at making water infrastructure work better for us. And I'm not proposing that it's the Bradfield scheme per se. What I'm saying is let's use the smarts of the 21st century to use the new technology and infrastructure to make it work in some sort of iteration that gets water to where it's needed to grow more agricultural production and grow regional communities that grow our nation's economy. It's just common sense, and no matter what level of government you are, all Australians want out of us is just that, common sense. And this just takes leadership. I know that my National Party colleagues and I, we're going to make sure that if we're re-elected, that will be part of our agreement of being part of a new government, is to continue to invest and build on the $1 billion we put into water infrastructure. But we're going to put a blowtorch to the states as well, and it's great to see John Barilaro coming on the journey with us. We want to see the colour of his money and every other state with us.
Okay, just a last question here. I've got to go, but there has been a huge response to your fight against the activists, speaking up about the activists that are going on to farms and attacking farmers just for farming, nothing more than that. My family's on the land. People are very worried. In fact, they're concerned, not just for their privacy, obviously, but they're worried about escalating threats of violence. What can be done here about websites that promote the activism?
Well, spot on. That was nothing more than a tack map for activists to look at and to go and trespass. And these are not just businesses. These are people's homes where children live. This is not what charities do. No Australian would reasonably think this is the actions of a charity. So I've written to Charities Commissioner to ask them to reconsider the charitable status of this group. But also I've had conversation with the Attorney-General about us stepping in, because in February I asked the agricultural ministers, who all came to the Ministerial Council and said, yes, we want to do something about it, but I haven't seen any state lift their trespass laws. So I think it's time now for us as a federal government to look at our legislative options to reach in and to stop these organisations from doing that. I respect people have a philosophical view, but that's not the Australian thing to do, is to do this to one another. In fact, humans don't do that to one another. These people have done a lot of damage to the activist cause, to the animal activist cause, and they haven't got a great record lately. And I think, in fact, they've belittled what they're trying to achieve. And really, Australians should not donate to any of these organisations who have just gone too far.
Okay, Minister, I'll put that information up on my Facebook page. We go to win right around the country. It has been raised with me by concerned, not just farmers, but concerned farming communities time and time again. David Littleproud, thanks very much for your time tonight.
Great to be with you, Peter.